I thought he just got tackled in bounds because I looked away from the game and then I saw them doing the coming back. I didn't actually know until later that it ended up for a touchdown because I was like, oh, cool. Kelsey caught it. They're going to get in field goal range. I looked away
Yeah.
before I could see it lateraled. I didn't realize until after the game. I was like, wait, that was a touchdown. That was a touchdown they took away.
Yeah,
So
Mahomes was definitely hot about them taking away that one. He was agitated on the sidelines after that game, and his post-game presser, he's going to be receiving a fine from the NFL. The way he came after the refs in that one, he is definitely owing the league some money this week. Patrick Mahomes, the golden boy, the golden child, best quarterback in the league over the last few years. His team is struggling. He may not be struggling incredibly, although his numbers have taken a dip in the sense that he's more averaging like maybe a little bit more than a touchdown a game this season. It's just been a struggle. It's been like a fight each and every game, and it's reflected in the win-loss record. 3 of the last 4 games the Chiefs have lost. They lost the game to the Eagles. They lost the game this week to the Bills. Green Bay beat them. I was not expecting Green Bay to get a win over the Chiefs this season, but here we are. The Chiefs just 1 game ahead of the Broncos in the AFC West. What's going on with them, man?
Okay, so that is a loaded question that requires dipping into a couple of buckets here. So in terms of Patrick Mahomes averaging like a touchdown and a half per game, he's at 23 touchdowns, 11 interceptions on the season. Patrick Mahomes is not putting up 40 touchdowns a season because literally nobody in the NFL is putting up 40 touchdowns in a season. No one in the league has 30 touchdowns this year from the quarterback position because offense has just plummeted all across the league over the last 2 seasons. And there's some nerdy football reasons for why that's the case in combination with the fact that like half the teams in the league are on their Tommy DeVito quarterback at this point. So like, yeah, there's some explanations for why all offense is down, but Patrick Mahomes is 4th in QBR in the league right now, 4th in touchdown to interception ratio. And by the way, Kansas City and DVOA had the 3rd ranked offense in the league going into last week. I don't know what the updated numbers are for this week. It would be fitting if they were 4th because that would just prove to you Kansas City has the 4th ranked offense in all of the NFL by all accounts and metrics, despite the fact that Kansas City finds themselves at 8-5 and presently 3rd place in the AFC and essentially have no chance of getting the number 1 seed anymore. Kansas City will probably go undefeated the rest of the season because they play Jake Browning's Bengals, the Patriots, the Raiders at home, and the Chargers. So they will probably go undefeated the rest of the way.
Hey, now, don't sleep on those Jake Browning Bengals. They are 2-0 over the last couple weeks. Better record than the Chiefs, certainly, over the last 2 games.
This is fair, but it's Jake Browning's Bengals. Trust me, they're in the group of 7th seed purgatory where I think if I remember correctly, there's 5 teams in the AFC that are 7-6 right now. I think that's a true thing. There are 5 goddamn teams in the AFC sitting at 7-6. But besides the point, so Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City have the 4th ranked offense in the NFL, which is they've been a top 5 offense all 7 years Patrick Mahomes has been, all 6 years Patrick Mahomes has been in Kansas City. They were a top 5 offense the year that Alex Smith was there too, and Mahomes was a rookie. But all 6 years Mahomes has started, they've been a top 5 offense in the NFL. And I was having this conversation with my friend Emil about whether Kansas City regrets the Tyreek Hill trade or not. Because if you keep Tyreek Hill in Kansas City, you take away Trent McDuffie and Leo Chenal because those were the draft picks that they took in the Tyreek Hill trade. You probably don't have the money to extend Chris Jones. So they go back to being a below average, middle of the road defense, maybe below average defense, while still what's the difference between a 4th ranked offense and a 2nd ranked offense when you're talking about a huge drop off on the defensive side of the ball? And I was kind of in the camp of like, they don't regret trading Tyreek Hill, even if the Tyreek Hill trade was a loss, because this year's Kansas City defense is basically just as good as the best defenses they've ever had with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. The first year they won the Super Bowl in 2019, they had the 10th ranked defense in the league. This year they're somewhere between 9th and 12th, depending on what metric you look at in defensive ratings. So they're somewhere near the best defense Mahomes has ever had, and they've won games with defense. However, the wide receivers have cost them 3 games now on the season. And it's not like I need to go to stats or I need to go to nerd numbers to prove it to you. No, they've lost 3 games plainly. Kadarius Toney had a drop go through his hands for a pick 6. and still dropped the game-winning field goal. He dropped 4 passes the first game of the season. If he drops only 3, they win that football game. They had the winning touchdown against the Eagles. Marquez Valdes-Scantling dropped it. And in this game, they had the winning touchdown on a lateral play to beat Buffalo, and Kadarius Toney lined up offsides. I can point to 3 games this year that the wide receivers directly cost Kansas City the game. So yeah, they definitely wish they still had Tyreek Hill. Also, fun stat Bill Barnwell brought up, Kansas City receivers have dropped more passes this season than any NFL team in the last 11 years. 11 seasons, more dropped passes than anyone in the league. And it's not like these receivers are so garbage that they're dropping passes left and right and they have to reinvent the receiver room. No, this is the same fucking receiving core that won a Super Bowl last year. They're scheming these guys open. They're just not ready for these passes that are coming at them at the timing and pacing that they are. And that's got to be so frustrating if you're Kansas City, because you're executing. The motion is confusing defenses in this sport that has figured out first that you can play 2 high safeties on every opponent, because Tyreek Hill is very responsible for why NFL offense is down as much as it is, but for defense that figured out we can play 2 high safeties and double team Kelsey because none of your receivers can win a one-on-one battle, even with Mahomes buying you 7 seconds of time in the pocket. It's just incredible that you can plain as day see Kansas City's going to play their first road playoff game ever, most likely, because of wide receivers, because of the wide receivers that we can point to directly and say, you are the reason Kansas City's going to have to play a road playoff game.
Now, you said it's the same unit, but it's not, because there are a couple of subtractions that I should mention. So Juju Smith-Schuster, he's currently in New England. Eric Bieniemy, he's currently in Washington. Do they wish that they had those 2 guys back? Because I heard some Fire Nagy chants yesterday at the end of the game.
It's almost like Eric Bieniemy was actually adding value to that offense, right? It's almost like they had an excellent working dynamic between Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy that had been crafted over 6 years of working together as coordinator and coach. It's almost like they had a good thing going with the coordinator. And yes, we now know what Eric Bieniemy's value is, because Eric Bieniemy is going to Washington, and Washington sucks. But the thing about Washington, they got no players on that offense. I know they have Terry McLaurin.
I was just about to say, don't talk ill of Terry McLaurin and Brian Robinson. They're great.
They don't have players on offense. And Sam Howell takes so many sacks. But Eric Bieniemy also left Kansas City, and the whole thing is falling apart because Matt Nagy has infected their play calling with Matt Nagy. They have had such boring play calls. The game against Miami was the one that really flipped it for me, because they ran a run play on first down, a run play on 2nd and 10, which my rule is never, ever run the ball on 2nd and 10, ever. Even if you're going for 4th down, don't run the ball on 2nd and 10. Run the ball on 2nd and 10, 3rd and 8 incompletion, punt on a 3 and out. Like, it has just been atrocious, some of the play calling that Kansas City has had this year. And despite all of that, they still could be 11-2. Or if you say one of the wide receiver mess ups happens, they're 10-3. Like, they're 10-3, and they're still a top 5 offense in the league, because Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes is the greatest advantage that you can find in this sport, that everyone's trying to find advantages on the offensive side of the ball. The greatest quarterback to ever play the sport and the greatest offensive head coach in the history of the sport gives you a competitive advantage that has guaranteed you're going to be a top 5 offense every year, because again, all 7 years Mahomes has been there, and that includes the year Alex Smith was starting over him, Kansas City has finished top 5 in the league in offense.
So it seems like their threshold, at least their threshold over the last few games, has been 20 points a game. Can they score more than 20 points? Because the games they've lost all have been games in which they've scored less than 20 points. So given that, and we're looking at this playoff picture, who should they be rooting to play against? We know, again, like you mentioned, their first round bye, that's long gone. It seems like they're not going to be able to touch that again. But who should they be hoping to get in that first round at this point?
First round, I don't think their opponent will matter that much. Like, if they're the 2 seed, which is the most probable outcome for them, because the Dolphins are going to probably lose a game the rest of the season. The Ravens are probably going to lose another game. And then the Ravens and Dolphins play each other in week 17. We talked about this last week when we were doing our Ravens video, that like the most likely scenario for Kansas City is they end up in the 2 seed. That's the most likely outcome at
But
this
I would
point.
counter, because we're watching the team that literally just beat them, Buffalo. They're close. They're close. They can, if they get in, they might very well get in, is just the 7th seed. So should they almost hope to avoid Buffalo? Because out of that mix of teams, because like, you have the Browns. I think they could beat the Browns. I think they could beat the Steelers, given the Steelers can't move the ball offensively either. Houston, we'll see with the CJ Stroud concussion, how that affects them moving forward. If the Broncos, I mean, they have a win over them this season, and the Broncos are coming on hot too. So it's kind of like you look at those teams, maybe familiarity in the division. You don't want to face the Broncos. The Browns defense is great, but again, is Joe Flacco going to be Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game? I don't think so. I guess you just don't want to face Buffalo, and maybe you don't want to face the Broncos just because of division familiarity.
Okay, so in fairness, there are teams that they do want to play. Like, they want to play the Colts. Let's put that out there. They want to play the Colts in the first round of the playoffs. But Kansas City should not be afraid of any of these teams, even Buffalo. Buffalo is really, really good. They're one of the 6 best teams in the NFL, and it would suck for Kansas City. Kansas City would rather drop that game to the Chargers and get to play Cleveland than play Buffalo in that first wildcard game. I think that is also fair. However, they shouldn't be afraid of any of those teams. They're playing a home playoff game. They should feel pretty good about their chances in that game. And once it gets to the second round of the playoffs, if Kansas City gets to the second round of the playoffs, do you want to play Baltimore? Do you want to play Miami? That's kind of the game that they're playing at this point. And whoever wins that game is going to end up in the 1 seed, so they won't meet each other until the conference championship. But it seems like it's going to be, do you want to host Baltimore or do you want to host Miami? Or potentially, do you want to go on the road? Because if they do drop one of these games that I suspect they won't drop, because again, Patriots, Jake Browning's Bengals, Raiders, and Chargers. They'll probably win all of those games the rest of the season. I know things look not great for Kansas City right now. It's not so bad that they're going to lose a home game to the Raiders.
What is the probability they win the AFC, though?
It would require the Dolphins and Ravens to both go 2-2 the rest of the season, because Kansas City's now 8-5.
Not the 1 seed, just winning the conference and going to the Super Bowl. What is that probability? What is that pie chart for the Chiefs this year? Whereas in the past, it might have been 50% likely the Chiefs go. How do you think it's been affected by the issues that we've seen with the wide receiving core, as you mentioned, and their inability?
As it stands, let's call it 33%. I'll say 1 in 3 chance, because I think it's Baltimore at 40%. It's Kansas City at about 33%. It's the Dolphins at about 30%, and then everyone else 3 to 5%, somewhere in that range. But like, it's most likely going to be Baltimore, Kansas City, or Miami who wins. And most likely they're going to have to go on the road against one of those teams. I think it's going to be Baltimore, but I'm not 100% sure it's going to be Baltimore right now, because Baltimore has to play at San Francisco on Christmas, and then Baltimore has to play the Dolphins. So there is still a path for Baltimore to lose 2 games the rest of the season and Kansas City finish ahead of them based on strength of schedule tiebreaker. But I think Baltimore is the favorite in the AFC right now. And granted, I'm wearing my Patrick Mahomes jersey. Don't ever bet against red. Ever. Don't do it. Don't bet against red. Kansas City has won time and time again. There's a reason they've never played a road playoff game. There's a reason that they've already accomplished as much as the first Patriots dynasty within a span of 5 years. Don't ever bet against Kansas City. However, I will say Kansas City is probably not the best team in the AFC based on production this year. But again, all they need to be the best team in the AFC is wide receivers to not drop passes at a historically bad rate and to line up onside. So like they are getting by because this is a big thing that helped them earlier in the season. They're winning games by defense, and it hasn't happened recently, and that's why you've seen the results flip. Like the Packer game that you mentioned earlier, that's the one game I can point to and say that one's on Mahomes. They lose that game regardless of how the defense plays. Mahomes is the reason that they lost that Packers game. That interception at the end was not Skyy Moore's fault. That was Mahomes missing the timing route. Mahomes missed a couple passes throughout the game that would have set them up for the win. That's the one I can point to and say that's Mahomes not playing well and the defense not stepping up to bail them out. Because the defense has won games this year for Kansas City. You could point to the Jacksonville game, the Miami game. Defense has won games for Kansas City so far this year. And that's something that should be an expectation for Mahomes that eventually your defense can bail you out. It doesn't have to be Mahomes winning every single game. They played a perfect half in the Super Bowl, but if not for the Nick Bolton strip six that goes back the other way, Kansas City might still end up losing that Super Bowl despite playing a perfect half of football on offense. So defense is going to help them out, and defense should be able to help them out against Miami because they know how to defend Miami. It's just about execution. You saw what the Eagles did to Miami. You've seen what other teams have done to the Dolphin offense. You can stop Miami on offense. They are not unbeatable. So I think Kansas City would feel good matching up against Miami. They would feel less good matching up against Baltimore because of what Baltimore brings on the defensive side of the ball.
Side tangent for anyone that uses Brock Purdy's weapons against him in the MVP argument. This is what happens when you take away a quarterback's weapons. This is the Mahomes season, the best quarterback in the league. You're seeing Mahomes struggle with subpar weapons. So just got to put that out there. Any quarterback in the league needs a competent arsenal of weapons to succeed in this league at the highest of high levels, even the greatest quarterback in the league currently. Let us know in the comments below, what do you make of this Kansas City Chiefs season so far? How do you think the Chiefs will finish? Will they win the AFC at the end of the day and defend their crown in the Super Bowl? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias from Juju and Kyle. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.